She hadn't seen him in 6 years. The sun had risen and fallen over this land more than 2,000 times since the last moment they stood side by side. But the memory never left her, not even as her body weakened, not even as the wound on her leg festered, and the heat threatened to swallow her whole. And when the wind shifted something in her, moved a tremor deep beneath the years, as if the earth itself remembered elsewhere. The boy jolted awake, his breath sharp, his chest tight, not from a dream, but from the echo of a presence he could no longer name, a bond formed in silence, now calling out through time and distance. He hadn't heard her voice in half a lifetime, but somehow he knew she was waiting, not with words, not with sound, but with that same quiet gravity that once pulled him into a world where nothing else mattered. Memory doesn't vanish, it coils, it waits. And now, across miles and wounds and silence, it was reaching back, pulling them both into the moment that would change everything. The mornings always came the same. The boy woke to the sound of traffic, not birds to the flicker of a screen, not sunlight, and yet every day as he tied his shoes, he hesitated just slightly, as if waiting for something that never arrived at school. He drifted through lessons, polite, quiet, good at disappearing, and when no one looked, he traced patterns on his desk, spirals like the motion of a trunk curling around his hand. Years ago, the elephant too moved through routine, her herd gone, her sanctuary, quieter place. Now she stood for long hours under the same tree, though it gave little shade, lifting her head at distant noises with a flicker of something like hope. Then lowering it again with the heavy certainty of disappointment, she limped through the dry grasses, her leg a constant throb, but worse was the space beside her, always empty. Both of them lived surrounded by the ordinary, yet carried inside them the hollow shape of something that used to be not broken, not gone, just missing, the kind of pain that doesn't scream. It waits. It lingers. And in the stillness of their separate worlds, they both kept listening for something they'd stopped believing would ever return. It happened without warning. One morning there was laughter fruit, the weight of a trunk pressing gently against a boy's shoulder, and by nightfall it was gone. The car was packed. The goodbye never spoken. Thomas didn't understand why no one looked him in the eye. When he asked if they'd go back, he screamed once, clenched his fists, then said nothing. For weeks, his world shrank to the shape of a memory, and he carried it like glass, thin and always about to break. And far away, Luma stood in the same spot for days, her calls low and rising over the trees unanswered. She paced the edges of the enclosure, refusing food, swinging her trunk as if searching for a scent that the wind had already taken. She stopped playing, stopped approaching. People stood with her, back to everything, and no one could reach her. The days blurred into each other, and the weight of absence settled like dust. Thomas changed. He stopped speaking to animals at the zoo, stopped drawing elephants on his notebooks, started sleeping with the lights on, and Luma limped deeper into herself. Silent, slow eyes, distant as if the world had dulled the color of sound, and year after year, the ache did not fade, it rooted, it spread. It became the air they breathed. Let's take a short pause. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? Has there ever been someone in your life, a person, or even an animal, who remembered you after many years apart? That moment of quiet recognition, that invisible thread still holding. If stories like this speak to your heart, make sure to follow. There's much more to come, and each one carries a piece of something we all feel, but rarely say aloud. It started as nothing, just a late-night scroll through noise and faces and moments that weren't his. And then it stopped, a grainy video barely 30 seconds long, a collapsed elephant, motionless in the heat, a swollen leg, a slow breath, a pair of eyes that looked straight through the screen and straight into him. Something inside Thomas broke open. Not loud, not sudden, but deeply, like a crack in the foundation of a house you didn't know was unstable. The world faded, and it was just that shape in the dust, the curve of the ear, the stillness that wasn't surrender, but waiting. He replayed it over and over, heart pounding with a strange mix of wonder and dread. Was it her? Could she remember? Did she ever stop waiting, or had he disappeared from her world? Like everyone said, he must. He couldn't sleep, the city around him too loud, too alive, while something inside him went quiet and still. A deep listening he hadn't felt in years, and then came the storm. The voice in his head, whispering, "It's too late, she won't know you. It's been too long," but beneath that, a pull stronger than fear. Not to a place, but to a truth that had never died. Not really. He packed a bag without thinking, his hands trembling with the weight of what might be. And still he went. Not for closure, not for guilt, but because sometimes even the smallest flicker of hope can become the fire that brings you home. The grass crunched under his feet, dry and brittle, the air thick with heat and something heavier memory, maybe fear, maybe both. He moved slowly, not because of doubt, but reverence, as if walking into a dream. He wasn't sure would hold her shape lay still, against the dust smaller than he remembered, and yet vast. Her skin cracked her side, rising in shallow rhythm, her eyes dull but open, staring somewhere far beyond, and for a long moment he couldn't speak. His throat tight with every year he'd been gone, then softly, almost like a prayer, he said her name. Luma. His voice cracked, but the sound carried, and something in her shifted. Not big, not sudden, just a twitch of her ear. The lift of her head, her trunk moved uncertain, slow, as if through water. And their eyes met, and nothing happened, and then everything did, a pause so long, it felt like the world had stopped holding its breath. Then, in a single trembling instant, her gaze cleared. Her breath caught, her whole body shivered, and she let out a sound that didn't belong to pain or exhaustion, but to memory, deep and low and ancient and raw. Tomas stepped closer, one hand out, but didn't touch. Not yet. She leaned in first, slowly, gently brushing her trunk along his shoulder like she used to, and he closed his eyes because the moment was too much and not enough, and somehow exactly what it needed to be. Not dramatic, not loud, just that impossible quiet when two souls remember each other across time, the kind of silence that speaks louder than anything else. And in that space between heartbeat and breath, they both knew they had come home. The days blurred gently into one another, not with urgency, but with a kind of quiet unfolding. Thomas woke early, not because he had to, but because something inside him needed to see her first thing in the morning. Luma always waited near the same tree, now not lying down, but standing slowly with more strength in her legs. Her eyes followed him from the moment he appeared, no longer dull, but aware, curious, soft. He brought her fruit mangoes just like before, and sometimes she reached out before he even offered, as if memory had returned. Not as a thought, but a muscle, a knowing. They moved slowly around each other, rediscovering old rhythms. He spoke to her like no time had passed, his voice low and gentle, and sometimes she answered not with words, but with a rumble or a pause, or the way she rested her trunk lightly against his chest. He laughed more now, not big or loud, just honest small bursts that loosened something tight inside him. And once, when he tripped, she nudged him back upright, and for a second, they both stilled the air around them, bright and still. The caretakers watched, but never interrupted. They knew what this was. It wasn't a miracle, it was a return, not to what was, but to what never left. The infection faded day by day. Her step grew, steadier. Her ears moved with the wind again, and Thomas stopped looking at the ground when he walked, started drawing again in the corners of his notebook, little sketches of trunks and trees and soft eyes. One afternoon she reached up and dropped a mango into his lap on her own, and he looked at her and smiled through tears. Because sometimes it's not the big moments, but the smallest ones that prove something broken has begun to mend what they had. Wasn't just memory, it was presence. It was love kept, alive beneath silence and time. And now at last it had room to breathe again, and in the warmth of that shared breath, they both began not over, but forward. Some bonds are not broken by silence. They are only buried beneath time, waiting quietly beneath the noise of growing up the weight of distance, the ache of unanswered memory. And when they return, they do not arrive with thunder, but with a look, a touch, the quiet certainty that something lost was never truly gone. Thomas no longer wonders if she remembered because now he knows. And Luma no longer searches the horizon because now he is here. And in that stillness between them, they have found something greater than reunion. They have found the part of themselves. They thought the world had taken some connections do not fade. They endure, they wait. And when the moment is right, they come back, not to where things were, but to where healing begins.